alone.
Yeah, we had one case where every time, so it was an allegation of sexual abuse, it would get ruled out. Then there would be another anonymous call to CPS about another allegation. And this went on for 2 or 3 years. And in that case, we actually had video of mom coaching the child, right? And so I was able to sit down with CPS and show them, like, look at this video. Look at this timeline. Right? I mean, you can see exactly what's going on here.
Right.
Like, every time they got in a fight, boom, sexual assault allegation. 3 criminal investigations. Like, oh, God, that case pisses me off.
Right.
Welcome to the Consultation. My name is Josh Floyd. This is Christina Jimenez. We are both attorneys here in Texas, and we're going to talk about some CPS stuff today, right?
Yes, we're going to talk about CPS Investigations, so Department of Family Protective Services, Child Protective Services, those are common names, and how sometimes it comes up in the context of our divorce cases with children or our custody cases. Sometimes, unfortunately, the department is used as a weapon in some of these custody cases. Oftentimes, they are obviously warranted, and we need to go in and we need to have kiddos protected. But unfortunately, sometimes we have seen that one parent uses them as a weapon against the other. And so, those are always interesting calls when we get those from our clients that CPS is knocking at their door and they don't understand what's going on and they don't know how to proceed. And so, what do you normally tell clients whenever they get hired or we're hired in these types of cases or in custody cases?
So if CPS is already involved when they hire, is that what you're asking?
No, I mean, I guess more in the context of we're representing them on a divorce or a child custody case, and then CPS gets called in.
Then I get a call from the client saying, hey, CPS has contacted me.
Mm-hmm.
I say, give me their information.
Right.
Yeah. Tell me who's contacting you. Let me reach out to them, figure out what's going on, right? Which stage of the investigation we're in, what their plans are, what the allegations are, so we can kind of maneuver and figure out where we need to go.
Yeah, and I'll just say it's kind of our MO whenever clients retain is we always explain to them, if you are ever called by the department, or if you're called by a criminal investigator, don't speak to them, give them our information. We will call them, we will kind of intervene and figure out what the heck is going on. Because that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they feel like I need to defend myself, I need to tell them all this information and maybe they'll just go away. And it doesn't really happen like that. So
it doesn't. Yeah, and CPS investigations, because you mentioned criminal stuff, right? I mean, if in fact there's going to be a criminal investigation following, right? Everything you say to CPS is the same thing as if you said it to a detective, right? All of their reports, all that stuff is going to be used as evidence. So if it does result in an investigation, then yeah, they'll use all that against you too.
So typically what we see in the context of these interactions with the department, they've actually created a new, program that's called family-based services. And this came out really a few years ago, and I'm actually a big fan because initially what they would solely do is they would just go in and investigate, right? And the purpose of the investigation was to determine, did the parent in fact go in and do whatever the act may be, right? So did the parent, neglect the child? Did the parent abuse the child? Was there sexual abuse? And then at the end of that, they would make a finding, right? So it would either be ruled out, it would be unable to determine, or it would be a reason to believe. Okay, and I'll let Floyd explain what all that stuff means here in just a second. But now what they've done is they've created a new department basically called Family-Based Services, where their purpose is if they get an intake that maybe it's some behaviors that are concerning, but they don't rise to the level of abuse or neglect, they will actually intervene and try to help the family and provide services like parenting classes, or maybe drug classes, or maybe counseling. And so that's actually pretty cool. And I think that it's things that's been helpful to our clients that we've actually taken advantage of. So.
Yeah, and it may not be something that they're doing on purpose, right? Like a medical neglect case may just be that the parent legitimately can't afford to get the medical help that they need. And so CPS will come in and help pay for that, help make sure the child gets what they need. And so it's not always a bad thing or something that the parent's doing wrong. It's just something that the department sees that the child needs help with, and the parent's unable to do it for whatever, unable or unwilling, hopefully unable to do it for whatever reason. So they just assist with that.
And so, in the context of an investigation, the three different determinations, you want to explain that?
Sure. So we'll start with ruled out. Whenever our client's being investigated, that's our favorite. And it just basically means they're ruled out, right? They could not find any evidence. And none of the evidence showed that the allegation, whatever it was, is in fact true. Either by interviewing with the child. A lot of times in our cases, we're showing text messages and videos that contradict what the allegation is, and kind of show a motive, I guess the word I was looking for, motive for the CPS report that contradicts the allegation. So ruled out, it didn't happen, basically, in the department's eyes. Unable to determine, also pretty self-explanatory. They kind of named these really conveniently. So unable to determine, they couldn't determine if it happened or not, right? And then reason to believe, you'll never guess, but they have a reason to believe that it happened.
Very good, Floyd. I like that. Again, at the onset of this, if you ever are the recipient of that call of like, hey, this is John with the department, and I have been assigned to investigate this case, or I need to talk to you because there's been an allegation made. If you have an attorney already because you're in a divorce or custody case, then call your attorney. Just say, hey, John, can you please give me your contact information? I do have an attorney and I'd really like to visit with them first, right? If you don't have an attorney, then I would probably recommend that you do the same thing and say, John, let me call you back, and then go and consult with and potentially hire an attorney to handle this investigation for you. And I say this all the time in the context of family law and criminal defense, and that is, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so that's why you have to go to a professional so they can tell you, this is how this thing's going to play out. I've done this 1,000 times before, and we're going to take control, and we're going to make sure that you're protected if you need it, right?
Right, because sometimes you'll get, I'll say, overly concerned investigators and CPS workers, right, that are trying to do the right thing, but aren't realizing what the real problem is, or what the root of the problem is. And so we can help explain that and say, instead of doing this service, how about this service? Like, we know our clients, we know the case, we know what's going on. And so this is more of the problem, right? This is the root of the problem. So let's try to do that, or something like that. And so we can assist with that kind of stuff.
Right.
With regard to the findings, though, I don't know if we want to talk about it now. We're going to talk about it now. If you plan to talk about it later, then
Let's
sorry,
talk about it
we'll
now.
talk about it now.
Okay.
So with regard to the findings, if you get a ruled out, you can have that removed, the CPS investigation removed from your record, right? You just have to fill out this form, send it off, and it's removed. But the reason to believe doesn't mean that you did it, right? It just means that that agency believes that you did it. Okay, and so even if you get a reason to believe, and we've had success appealing those up to an administrative court, where a judge comes in and you have a trial in front of an administrative judge, present evidence to show why your client, or to prove that your client didn't commit the allegations, and then they can remove the reason to believe from your record, and then subsequently remove it all from your record. So,
And when you say record, I just want it to be clear that it's not like this public record, right? It's not like somebody can go to a district clerk's office and pull, this information. What he's talking about, or what we're talking about, is the department obviously keeps their internal records on, parents who've been accused of things, and also kiddos' names, right? That's all in their records, so they can do a search and they can find it, right? And so a lot of times, you don't want to have an RTB or even a ruled out, right? If you were investigated and they found that you didn't do this, I've had doctors, I've had nurses, I've had teachers, yes, who are like, listen, I need this completely eliminated from my record. And we had, going to the administrative hearing, We had one lady who she had worked almost her whole life to become a counselor for children and had pursued her master's, and she was almost finished. She gets a false allegation filed against her. They RTV'd her, and we went through the
RTB
full.
is reason to believe.
That's RTV'd her. And then, but we did go all the way to the administrative judge on that one, and thank the Lord at the end, he did rule it out, because that would have just basically destroyed her whole life. That was a good win for me. I was pretty excited about that. That was a crying moment for us.
And
So
it can affect your, if you want to adopt someone later, right? The CPS investigations can adversely impact that. If there's another allegation against you, they can pull up the past and kind of use that against you, multiple CPS allegations.
right.
So it's always good to have them removed if you can.
So the call that I sometimes get that people are pissed about is, they say, little Johnny came home today, and he told me that some lady from CPS went and talked to him at school, and they didn't have permission, they didn't have any rights to go and talk to my kids. How in the hell could they do that?
Tell them because they're CPS, and they
Right.
can do that.
They can. I don't know. They just can. And so, they have rights to access to your children to conduct an investigation, right? And in fact, I want to say, and don't quote me on this, but I think that it is 72 hours from the time that that intake comes in. If there's allegations of abuse or neglect, they have to lay eyes on the kiddo just to make sure that the child is safe and not in any sort of danger or harm,
Yeah,
right?
and I think, again, don't quote me on this either. Don't quote us on anything really, but specifically this. I think when they get the initial intake, there's different levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's like one level where it's the child's in danger right now, and we have to react within like 24 hours, and there's one level where not so serious, whatever. Um, so
So yeah, I mean, they have the right to go and see your kiddos if they're
mhm,
school age. Sometimes that happens. Other times, depending on the allegations, they will call the parent and they'll say, "Hey, I really need to see your child." And I have had parents that are like, "I don't want them to talk to my kid. I don't want them to see my kid." And in those cases, I will tell them we need to cooperate. Right? They need to come to the house, or you need to take them to the facility. Let them, lay eyes on the kiddos. And obviously, I don't want you talking to them, and I'll tell the investigator, I don't want you asking my client any questions, but I understand that you have to see the child. And I think that's kind of the overarching theme when I'm dealing with CPS investigations is I want to cooperate to the extent that it's not going to cause harm to my client, right? And most often when I'm dealing with investigators, I'm very agreeable, I'm very polite, I'm very, kind. I shift my schedule around to work with them, because I want them to understand that my client's here to cooperate and to make sure that the child is safe, right? And I think, most of the time, our clients, in the context that we're involved, they really haven't done anything. And so it's like, come on, I'll share everything with you. And we're an open book, right? So just cooperate to the extent that you can. Now, obviously, if maybe you did something that you were not supposed to do and you have major concerns, that's where we do have to step in and be a little bit more protective because, as Floyd stated, there's criminal consequences sometimes linked to this stuff.
right. And we're not trying to say CPS is a bad agency by any means, right? I mean, they have a really good purpose, and we want them to be able to go talk to kids at school. If a child's being sexually abused or physically abused at home, right, you don't want that child to go back home and then find out about it, right? So go talk to the kid, make sure the kid's safe. It's hard to explain that to clients when they're on the phone with that call, though, because they're
Mm-hmm.
pissed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand from a parent's side how you'd be mad that they didn't talk to you first, but the reason that they have the ability to do that is important. I think that, like I said, for the most part, we'll cooperate. Just like anything else, right? You got bad apples. You have overly aggressive investigators sometimes, and we don't always agree with their decisions
Mm-hmm.
and outcomes. And so, Again, we may not like them, but we do have to comply because that's what's required to make sure the kid's safe.
Right. And so, like, so typically what'll happen is you'll get the call. They'll say, "Hey, I want to see the kiddo." We let them see the kiddo, and then I will typically set up an actual interview with my client about 1 to 2 weeks out, right? And that's most of the time because my schedule is a little bit wonky, but also because I need time to hear the allegations, right? And that's my big thing is when I'm talking to the investigator, I will say, I want you to read me the intake, right? What are they saying that allegedly happened? Because I need to be able to get that information to figure out, okay, well, they're saying that, this kiddo came home with bruises from dad on Saturday. And I go to my client and he says, I didn't even have the kiddo on Saturday. Saturday he was with his mom and, here's my text messages to prove it, right? So I want to get all the information that I can from the department so that I kind of treat it like a mini trial in
Right.
some regard.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll get videos, I'll get text messages, I will already have my collaterals. So that's one thing that will happen is the department is going to want to talk to what they call collateral. So the people that are basically going to vouch for you that have seen you with the kiddo, right? Depending on the incident, if there were other witnesses that were there, I want to interview those witnesses and say, like, hey, tell me what happened. What are we dealing with here? Um, like you said, text messages, emails. A lot of times, what I will see in these cases is, again, when I get involved, it's because I have an ongoing divorce case or an ongoing child custody case. And so there's been times where I've created timelines for the investigator to say, listen, here's each time that we have gone to court. And oh, by the way, we happen to have a hearing next week where we're trying to take mom's visitation rights away. I'm really not surprised that you've called me, right? I'll have a breakdown of here's all the times that you guys have been called out. Here's what happened during those investigations. Here's all the false criminal allegations that have been made against my client. I'm thinking of a very specific case here. And so by the time I have that interview with the investigator, I've painted a picture and they feel much more like calm of, okay, I see where this is coming from, and we're just going to leave this alone.
Yeah, we had one case where every time, so it was an allegation of sexual abuse, it would get ruled out. Then there would be another anonymous call to CPS about another allegation, and this went on for 2 or 3 years. And in that case, we actually had video of mom coaching the child, right? And so I was able to sit down with CPS and show them, like, look at this video, look at this timeline, right? I mean, you can see exactly what's going on here.
Right.
Like every time they got in a fight, boom, sexual assault allegation, 3 criminal investigations. Like, oh God, that case pisses me off.
Right. Well, and so I'll tell you that one of our, I guess bigger cases, or at least one that's momentous to me, is this poor dad had supervised visitation with his 2 little girls for about 2 years before he came in and he hired us. And it was because of CPS investigations that had been perpetuated by mom. And unfortunately, his previous attorney wouldn't fight it, or he would kind of just told him, like, listen, you got to suck it up and you're just going to have to deal with this. And so we fight and we slowly get visitation. We get all the way up to an SPO. And then, of course, the investigations start popping up. And we are able to show at the final trial that mom had a history or pattern of going, what she would do is she'd take the kiddo to the doctor, and then she would tell the doctor, hey, my daughter said that daddy slapped her yesterday and I'm really concerned. Well, doctors and nurses, teachers, counselors, they're mandatory reporters. We are mandatory reporters, right? And so with that being said, we don't have a choice but to just call and say, hey, we heard that this kiddo, may be being abused. And so now, boom, CPS investigates, right? And so when that happens, and it's consistently ruled out, at least in this particular case, this judge was absolutely just pissed, and he made a finding of parental alienation. He ended up flipping custody. Our client got custody, mom got visitation, because they just, Yeah, don't do that. Like if your kiddo legitimately is in danger and you have legitimate concerns, then absolutely that's what the department is there for. But if you're doing it to try to garner some sort of strategic advantage, when you get called to the carpet and if the other side hires a good lawyer, you will probably lose custody or you'll get restricted access or you'll lose some rights. It's not going to be good.
No, and given it's a good temporary sword, right? Because you go to a hearing and you say, Judge, there's an open CPS allegation for or investigation for physical abuse, sexual abuse, medical neglect, whatever. Judge has to protect the child and is going to say, okay, supervised visit till we figure out what the heck's going on, right? And so you get that temporary relief that you want, but in the end, we're going to figure it out, and it's going to be ugly.
Yeah.
And on top of that, like you're taking the department resources away from really protecting kids that are in danger,
Right.
which is their purpose. They're not used here to be used as leverage or a sword. Um, and so there may be a child out there that's really being harmed that they can't help because they're helping this BS.
Right. Well, and I've actually had that happen here recently where where there was an intake made to the department and the investigator didn't even contact my client. My name was all over the CPS file because I'd been involved in this case for a couple of years and we'd had lots of CPS investigations. And that investigator was like, so we just received an intake. I apologize for calling you on a Saturday, but here's what it states. Are you still his attorney? Yes, I am. And here's what it states. I feel like this is probably just a tool or, that mom's just saying this stuff because there's an ongoing custody dispute. And I was like, absolutely. And she's like, okay, well, and I explained everything that had happened to her. And she's like, okay, well, I'm not going to bother your client with this. I'm just going to go ahead and close this out. And I was like, wow. And so now, this mom, it can't even, has zero credibility with the department because she has made so many false allegations.
So I found out recently, I didn't even know they do this, but they put them on like a watch list, right? There's like a list of people that make false allegations. And when those reports come in, they just disregard them if they come in from those people.
And it's actually a criminal offense to make a false allegation to the department. I have never, had anybody charged with one. I've never seen it done in my cases, but it's absolutely in the penal code. And I have attempted to
But
have my clients file charges
I was
for
gonna say
it.
I've
Yeah.
pushed it. I've
Yeah,
pushed it.
absolutely. Because again, I mean, there are kiddos out there that need to be protected. And if we're having to deal, or if these investigators are having to deal with all this crap, you're taken away from those kids and it pisses me off honestly and it pisses the judges off to no end, so just don't do
And
it.
it is. I mean, it's certainly not fair to the kids, particularly with sexual abuse allegations, right? Because now they're going under SANE exams and um, what's the other one? The rape kit stuff.
Yeah, isn't
Is
that
that the
same?
same?
Mm-hmm.
What's the one where they do the interviews?
Oh, the
Uh,
forensic
Forensic
interviews.
interviews, SANE exams, and that stuff's not good for the kids, right? And so the kids, yeah, is one thing, but then also like this is expensive for our clients. I mean, you've talked about how much time it takes getting prepared, moving our stuff around so that we can deal with this because it has to be dealt with urgently. It costs our clients thousands of dollars to go through this type of crap, and then nothing happens.
Right, right.
Irritating.
Yeah, I mean, and again, there have been those cases and we've had to, defend some of these people where, maybe they did really awful crap, right? And even in the context of those CPS investigations, when our clients have confided in us and they've told us, like, listen, this is what we've done, we still approach it with this concept of cooperation, right? But we're not going to have our clients incriminate themselves, right? That will invoke their Fifth Amendment right. We will allow them access to the kiddo because we have to. But these things do happen. The idea behind the department and what you'll see is if it's family-based services, they're going to give you tools, right, and classes and things like that. If it goes full-blown investigation and potentially into a court case, which is a topic for a part two of this whole series, they will
Oh, this
give
is a
you.
series
It's
now.
going to be a series.
Awesome.
That's gonna be two-part series.
Oh, two parts. Is that a
So I
series?
don't know. It's not a series, but what they'll do is they'll put you on what they call a service plan, right? And the idea is always what we call family reunification, right? It's to make sure that, listen, if maybe have problems with anger management and maybe you did use a little bit of excessive force on your kiddo, we're going to give you tools and resources so that you don't continue to make those mistakes, right? And I'd say a lot of the times in our cases, those tools are actually helpful and it makes these people better parents and it makes these kiddos have better lives. But, sometimes there's just parents that they're not interested in being better. And that's exactly where the department needs to be.
Yeah, that's a good point because we talked about it a lot where, our clients didn't do anything, but what if our clients did, right? I mean, if we actively know that our client is abusing a child and they will not listen to us, we will withdraw,
Right.
right? We're not going to deal with that crap. But on the back end, front end, we're dealing with CPS and doing their services. On the back end, we're telling our clients, you've got an alcohol problem. You need to be doing ABC. You need counseling, right? We're trying to help our clients too. If they refuse to help themselves and are going to continue to put the child in danger, we're out, right? But so there are times when people need help and you have CPS doing it, but on the back end, we're also handling our clients also to make sure the kids are protected.
Yeah, and I mean, in the context of these CPS cases, I will tell my clients, especially once you get into court and you're given a service plan, I will tell them, I don't care how good I am at my job, and I'm really good at my job.
You would think that. I don't know why. You're not biased.
Very, very good at my job. But if you're not going to do the services, if you're not going to do the work, right, and put in the time and put in the effort to make yourself a better parent and be able to stand up in court and prove it, then you might have your rights terminated, right? You might have supervised access. The other parent may get conservatorship. And so you have to, do what the department asks of you, to a certain extent, right? And once you get to court, you have to do it no matter what. But, again, when we're at the investigatory phase, sometimes, let's say that, the department has pretty good reason to believe that maybe our client used excessive discipline on a child, right? Let's say hypothetically we talk to our client and our client says, yeah, I did. I, didn't think that I was, I hit them that hard, but I can't believe that I left that mark on them. I will never do it again. And I just, whatever I have to do, I will do it. Right. Well, then that's when we tell them, okay, we need to probably get this client into some anger management courses, or maybe we need to get them into parenting courses. And typically those are recommendations by the department. And sometimes, we say, well, client didn't really want to go and do the drug test, right? Because there's no really mentions of drugs. So let's not do that, but let's get them into, these parenting courses. And will that appease the department? Yes. Client, are you willing to make that sacrifice? Yes. Do we all believe that this is for the benefit of the kiddo? Yes. All right, let's roll. Let's get it done. Let's close out the investigation and get them on with their lives.
And sometimes it's a scheduling or financial issue with the services the departments wants our clients to complete, right? I mean, because up front, I mean, they'll require a lot of services. Like you said, drug testing, parenting classes, psych evals, drug and alcohol evaluations, things like that. And our clients have to work, right? And it's a lot. I mean, to have to do all of this in a certain time, plus keep a job, take care of kids. And so we can come in that situation also and talk to the investigators or the caseworkers and be like, look, okay, you can't do all of this right now. We can drag this out. We can move this here. What's most important? Let's move that up front. Client, can you rearrange your work schedule? That kind of stuff to try to get it all accomplished. But if you're going in without an attorney and don't know what you're doing, and they give you all these deadlines and you don't meet them, you're going to be in trouble with the judge.
Well, and so, and that's kind of because we're still really talking in the context of the investigation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I have had lots of clients, like maybe they're not active clients, but they call me for a consultation and they're like, so I got this call from the department and they told me that they wanted me to do all this stuff and they wanted to see my kids and they wanted to come to my house and I just told them to F off. I wasn't going to do anything. And now I just got
Is that
served.
the right answer or the wrong answer?
I feel like maybe that's wrong. It's not in the spirit of cooperation.
Absolutely not.
and so um and so then all of a sudden they get served with paperwork, right? Because that's the thing that you have to understand is if you're not gonna, potentially play nice and work and cooperate during the investigation phase, and you're not gonna, talk to them or allow them to see the children, or, maybe do a drug test, they actually have the ability and the authority to go to the judge. They have an attorney on staff. The attorney files paperwork with the court, and the court will read an affidavit. And if that judge has serious concerns about the safety and welfare of your child, they can actually do an emergency removal and take your kiddos and say, okay, now are you willing to cooperate? Now are you willing to maybe talk to us or comply with the services once they know that that kiddo is safe? And I feel like that's a great segue to part two. I don't know, I'm just saying.
What's part two?
It's going to be like what happens when you're served with CPS paperwork. We haven't talked about it, but that's going to be part two.
So are we done here? Is that
I feel like we should maybe be done. What else is there to say about investigations? Do you have more? I feel like you have more to share.
Well, I just wanted to, you talked about people saying F off to CPS
Okay.
caseworkers, and just wanted to point out these guys are just doing their jobs, right? They're just trying to protect kids. I know it's inconvenient, but being rude gets you nowhere, except to an investigation. Now, that's a great segue to part two.
Well, I just want to say that I've actually been praised by a lot of the people at the department because I am so kind and nice to them, and I feel like that helps my clients. And so I go out of my way because I think that their job is so freaking hard. It's hard dealing with some of these parents. It's hard just the content that it's kind of like our jobs, right? Of the crap that you see and hear, some of these things that happens to these kiddos. It's just they're doing, a good job, and so let's just kind of just be kind to them.
And if we're kind, then we can avoid what's going to happen in part two.
I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I think it might help. It might help. So, part two. Okay. Oh, wait, we're supposed to say this is not this is my job and I always screw it up. The outro, right?
So good at what you do.
This is not to be considered legal advice, right? So when Floyd and I get to talking about this stuff, we're talking about it from our personal experience. It's always dependent on the specific fact pattern, right? And what our clients are dealing with. So if you find yourself in this situation, you need to pick up the phone, you need to call a lawyer, you need to tell them what's going on, and always listen to that attorney's advice, because we don't know your situation, we don't know your investigator, your court, your district, and it's always different every single place, okay? And so don't accept this as legal advice. Make sure that you please like and follow on all our social media platforms. We have TikTok, we have Facebook, we have Instagram. If it is a social media platform, you're going to find us there. So please support us.